Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video with Mr. Terry as I continue my search for historical knowledge here on YouTube. Alright, today we are continuing on with the Admiral Yi series by Extra History. This is going to be part 4, so if you've not seen the previous ones, definitely check those out, then come back and join us over here. Really enjoying the series thus far, learning a lot about not just Admiral Yi, but this whole period of Korean history. Here in the late 16th century. Been learning a lot. Hopefully I'll be able to add a little bit of context and perspective, but first and foremost, just want to make sure that you guys are appreciating this video right here. If you like it, make sure you go down to the description and click on the video, to the original video, give them a like and subscribe if you have not done so yet. If you haven't yet, love to have you as a sub and be a part of our community here of history fans, and love to see you as a familiar face. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, part 4.
Last time, we left Yi storming through the waters south of Korea, savaging the Japanese fleet wherever he went. He had driven them first to consolidate their forces to try to thwart him, and then, finally, to give up on offensive naval operations entirely, restricting their fleets to just defending the vital supplies coming in at Busan.
Yeah, the big thing that's happened, has been happening, and which has been the smart thing, is Korea knowing what their advantage is, especially Admiral Yi, which is far more as a naval power than as much of a land power, at least as compared to the Japanese. Because when the Japanese got to land, they were able to be very successful, right? And that wasn't going well for the Koreans until Admiral Yi, builds up his navy and is able to defeat the Japanese navy, and at this point cut off supplies, which is a huge thing, and playing to their strengths, which is definitely what is happening here. Now remember, the Japanese are trying to invade the mainland. They're going through Korea with the objective of trying to take China as well. So this is pretty crucial for Japan's big plans, is going here through Korea, at least from the Korean perspective too. So that has been, the key kind of thus far, and it's pretty smart able to use that. And of course, Admiral Yi at this point was known for having not had lost any battles. Had been resoundingly success in every one that they've done thus far.
Now it was in this last harbor that Yi would attack them. In the 2 months since the Battle of Angulpo, Yi had trained his men, reinforced his fleet, and tried to rationalize the structure of Korean Naval Command. Now, on September 1st, 1592, he was ready to take on the combined Japanese armada at Busan. His fleet of 166 ships set out to destroy the nearly 500 Japanese ships awaiting them in Busan Bay.
One of the smart things that they had been doing, which is what you got to do in a naval scenario. When you're fighting somebody bigger than you, you need to have geography on your side. Like what Admiral Yi had done before was try to get them into smaller straits of water, so the large numbers of the Japanese fleet couldn't overwhelm the smaller numbers of the Korean, because toe-to-toe, the Korean fleet is, of course, awesome, including the awesome armored turtle ships. If you've seen the videos before, learn about them. They have kind of this ironclad top, which makes it really hard to board and keeps it kind of armored that way, with cannons out there. So those were very difficult to deal with if you were the Japanese, and they look awesome.
He caught a few stragglers along the way, but the Japanese had finally learned from their past encounters with him. They were holed up in the harbor now, and while Yi's ships were able to fire into the harbor from outside Japanese cannon range, he couldn't find an opening to get close enough to achieve the type of complete victory he craved. As long as the Japanese were in that harbor, they were protected by the surrounding troops and cannon on the shore. By the end of the day, Yi's fleet had destroyed 130 ships, and the Japanese hadn't sunk a single vessel, but the Japanese forces still held the all-important harbor of Busan. Yi had not been able to break their last line of supply. Now they'd be able to re-entrench and reinforce the harbor. As winter...
Can't let that happen, right? I mean, this is the way you can defeat the Japanese military. You've got to get them cut off from their supplies, and take the important geographic areas like the harbors, right? The harbors that are on the Korean peninsula. So, I mean, this is a must that's going to have to happen. So, interested to see what Yi is going to, the plan that's going to have happen here. By the way, the title of this video, so it's part 4, but it's "Those Who Seek Death Shall Live." Interesting. See how that plays in.
set in and the campaign season slowed down, the situation on the ground changed as well. An army from China had finally arrived in the north, and by January they had driven the Japanese out of Pyongyang. All over the country, the Japanese started to fall back, unable to sustain their lengthy lines of supply due to Yi's bottling up of their navy. By April, Seoul was retaken as well, and Busan served as the last great Japanese stronghold, anchoring their control on southern Korea. By August, Yi was promoted to Supreme Commander of the Korean Army and moved his base to the island of Honsando, where he had previously used his crane wing formation to crush the Japanese offensive fleet. Again and again, Yi petitioned the court for Marines so that he could resume naval operations.
Remember, this has always been a story with him. It's like he never got the support, it seemed like, from the military they would ask for. The interesting history of him growing up through the military was always like, it's like they never appreciated him. He would have these successes, but then because of the corrupt bureaucracy or whatever, they saw him as a threat and always pushed him aside once they didn't need him anymore. So interested to see what this is. I mean, it's pretty obvious that this has to work, right? And Admiral Yi, he's in charge. They've promoted him. Are they going to give him the supplies he needs, or are they going to be fickle about it, you know?
Because his fleet couldn't attack the Japanese so long as they stayed defended under their shore guns, and without Marines, he couldn't dislodge the shore batteries in order to follow up with the naval attack.
It's one and the same. You have to. I mean, they can't. Okay, they're trying to get that small strait of water, right? But the thing that's different now is that they have controlled the land, which means they're in cannon range from the land. You've got to not have that. You can't have that long distance protection there. Otherwise, this will never work. So yeah, you can see now with the Marines, you have to have the land invasion. But that's something, again, the Koreans have not done well with at this time against the Japanese. But it's going to have to happen.
But the Korean army was still in disarray at this point.
Yeah.
Some of the most significant military gains on land were actually being made by guerrilla forces and the righteous armies of Buddhist monks. And what little of the regular army there was not already deployed on the main offensive with the Chinese was simply not up to the task Yi needed.
Where did they get them
so
from?
his fleet sat, patrolled the waters, and kept the Japanese from breaking out of Busan. They would not get to engage in another major battle for some time. So instead, Yi focused on turning his island base into a production center. With the country ravaged by war and most of the working-age men conscripted into the army or the navy, the central government couldn't provide Yi's forces with the food, lumber, or weapons he needed to keep his men fed and his fleet in top shape. So he invited refugees to come to his island. He would protect them if they would work the land. At first they were just producing grain, but soon they were harvesting salt and timber. Then the production facilities grew to handle boat building and uniform manufacturing. Soon there was a full-fledged R&D wing on the island, and great forges to produce goods of iron.
It's like he's running a little mini colony now, right? It's impressive.
The first truly successful Korean muskets were forged here by Yi's research team. But as Yi was making his navy self-sufficient, the land war in Korea slowly ground to a stalemate, and peace talks began. The talks wore on for 3.5 years, until in September 1596, negotiations broke down, and Hideyoshi prepared a second invading force of 141,500 men to head to the shores of Korea. As this new invasion force was setting sail, the Korean court received a letter from one of the Japanese commanders, in which he appeared to be selling out one of his counterparts, telling the Koreans exactly where his hated rival's fleet would be sailing, and suggesting that if only Admiral Yi Sun-shin would sail there, he could wipe them out and do everybody a favor.
But is it a trap? Can you trust that intel? That's scary.
Now, Admiral Yi heard this and laughed. Yeah. Nice try. He refused the order to sail his fleet into an obvious Japanese trap. But Yi's childhood friend, Ryu Sung-young, had enemies in court, and when they heard of Yi's refusal to follow orders, they seized on this opportunity and had Yi tried for treason. Ryu could do nothing to save him.
Okay, I really want to know if this was legit intel or not, though.
Yi was ordered to return to Seoul for his punishment. His replacement as head of the navy would be Kiln. This was the guy who'd sat and done nothing when the Japanese ships first invaded, and then promptly scuttled his own fleet. A fleet 4 times as large as the one Yi had been using to inflict such heavy losses on their enemies. Yi was nearly sentenced to death for his insubordination, but there were still those in court who saw his value, and though they couldn't save him entirely, they did save his life. He was once more reduced to the rank of a common soldier and sent off to fight with one of the armies.
Yeah, if you saw the previous videos, they kept doing that. He'd get up this chain, be successful, and then boop, back down. But then he'd come back up, because then when the hard times would come, they're like, crap, we have nobody qualified. We better get Yi back. Keep coming back to him, and I'm sure that's what's going to happen again, right?
But not long after he arrived at the army, the Japanese tried the same trick again. They sent the court a letter, this time informing them of a large transport fleet that was on its way, and saying how easy it would be to pick off these transports if they hurried. Won Kyun was ordered to intercept this juicy target, and he immediately set sail with every ship Yi had built. But when he reached the waters near Busan, he was shocked to find not an unarmed transport convoy, but a massive war fleet of 500 ships.
So you got to be careful, right? When you receive this kind of intel, Yi was very reluctant towards the first part, because how do you know you can trust a defector, right? Could they be a spy? Could they be working from within? So, I mean, maybe this right here, if this fails, that's going to legitimize Yi's previous concerns.
Despite this and the exhaustion his men faced from traveling so quickly, Won Kyun ordered a head-on assault. The winds picked up, and a gale began to form.
How's it gonna go,
Won
though?
Kyun couldn't keep his fleet together. Soon, some 30 Korean ships were burning, having drifted close enough to the enemy that, for the first time in the war, the Japanese could deploy their preferred form of naval warfare, boarding parties. In a panic, Won Kyun ordered a retreat and fled to the island of Kadokdo, where he ordered his men off the ships to resupply. What he hadn't realized was that this island was under Japanese control. As his men searched for fresh water, they were set upon by the Japanese island garrison and slaughtered. Those who escaped fled back to the ships without any of the supplies they desperately needed. Then the fleet just sat there, deflated and listless.
What a disaster. What a disaster. You wonder if Yi had heard about this. Was he like, you guys are idiots. Don't do this. Don't do this. You can't trust that kind of intel.
Commanders asked for orders, but Won Kyun had none. Though Busan itself was not far away, he didn't even send out scouts or reposition his fleet. Then, on the night of July 15th, guided by a full moon, the Japanese struck. Won Kyun's forces were in a disadvantageous position. His men were fatigued from lack of supply and demoralized by their loss and the days of waiting. Caught off guard at night and without any sort of plan, they were no match for the organized and coordinated Japanese assault. Even abandoning ship couldn't save them, as those that made it to one of the nearby shores found themselves face to face with the Japanese army, who were silently waiting there for any stragglers who might try to escape, and were quickly cut down. Of the fleet Yi had so carefully built, only 12 ships escaped, saved by one of the sub-commanders who had tried to warn Won Kyun of the danger they faced. 157 Korean ships were lost that day.
And you got to think how long it takes. I mean, the lives, right, are incredible. Supply-wise, though, like how long it's going to take to make 150 warships. Especially, I don't know if some of them were turtle ships, which take even longer and are more expensive, but I'd be surprised to see if they could recover from this.
Day, including every turtle ship ever built. So 57 Korean ships were lost that day, including every turtle ship ever built.
Turtle ships.
So with only 12 ships left in the entire Navy, who did Korea call upon? Who else? But mere days after reinstating Yi as Admiral, the court informed him that they were disbanding the Navy.
You just wonder if he'd be like, screw you guys. Like, you keep doing this to me. I'm out of here. Like, I'm out. I'm leaving Korea or something like that. They're lucky Yi didn't defect to the Japanese side, almost, for all this pattern of disrespect that's happening.
Yi responded thusly. This humble subject still has 12 ships. However small the number may be, I solemnly swear I will be able to defend the sea if I prepare myself for death to resist the enemy. And so,
thinks he can do it with 12?
So Yi plotted and pondered where he would make his last stand. This would be it. This one decision would seal the fate of Korea. He studied charts and tides, and finally came to decide on Myeongyang, the Roaring Strait. This particular strait had a strong current, but unknown to the Japanese, its current had a strange property. Every 3 hours, it changed direction. It was upon this unusual current that Yi would gamble everything. On September 16th, the Japanese fleet, looking to destroy the final remnant of the Korean Navy, found Yi's scouts at the mouth of the strait. They chased the scouts into the strait, and that's when Yi fell upon them. Yi's flagship dashed into their midst, roaring cannon and tearing through Japanese timber. But his ship fought alone. The rest of his navy, possessed by fear at facing such a large force, had lagged behind. Eventually, though, seeing the havoc Yi's ship was wreaking on the enemy, they took heart. Messengers were sent from boat to boat with a mix of inspirational words, threats, and the hope of victory. And soon, the rest of Yi's tiny armada dove into the fray. Then, a stroke of luck. The enemy flagship was blown apart by friendly fire, and the
Oh.
Japanese began to waver. Some of their ships began to turn about to fall back, and it was just at this moment that the water's current turned. The strait was too narrow for all the Japanese ships to maneuver around each other, and with the current roaring against them, ship slammed into ship. They tried in vain to retreat, tangled, ships smashing into one another, screams and chaos, and over it all, the roaring water.
What causes the change of the current there? In this clockwork fashion of 3 hours. What changes that? Has something to do with tides? If you know, let me know.
With the current now on their side, the Koreans gave chase, laying into enemy ships on either side, a hail of fire and arrows. The Japanese boats burnt and sank. 133 vessels had come to crush this tiny remnant of Korean Navy, and 31 of them wouldn't be returning. Yi, even when facing odds of 10 to 1, had once again not lost a single ship. Word of Yi's victory spread. As his tiny fleet sailed, one by one, other ships began to show up. Ships that had been thought lost. Ships that had been hiding after the previous disaster under Wonkyun. These ships now came to join Yi's tiny armada. Refugees flocked to where Yi's ships were anchored, willingly giving him food, cloth, and iron. And perhaps most importantly, the Chinese, who had mostly limited their naval efforts to guarding ports until now, decided that they could work with the Korean Navy and take the offensive. And so we'll leave Yi rebuilding the Korean Navy until next week, when we see the Japanese invasion ended for good.
That's so crazy. Like, they keep saying, it's like all these battles where it'll be like, I don't know how many times they've done it thus far in the series, where it's like Admiral Yi won and didn't lose a single ship. Like, what is that all attributed to? You know what I mean? I mean, I get if you're a brave and bold leader, but like, logistically, how does that keep happening? 12 ships versus 133, and they got the Japanese to retreat or whatever out of that. That's crazy. Again, like I said earlier in the video, I'm surprised he just keeps coming back so admirably after being disrespected so many times. You must just be able to kind of put aside that and just think about the betterment of his nation with that there. But I hope they get the turtle ships back, though. Those are so cool. Well, great. This series has been awesome. We've got 2 more episodes, I believe, to go to, so look out for that. Make sure you sub. Enable notifications so you know when those pop up, and you can also be part of our live streams and be a part of the community that way. A couple other plugs. This video series was actually chosen by our Patreon pledgers, so all Patreon pledgers of all tiers get to vote in weekly polls. And if you'd like to do that, there's a link down below as well. If you'd like to be part of our deeper historical community, definitely join our Discord server, which link to that is also down below. But thanks first and foremost just for being here, for liking the video, for hopefully learning. That's what I'm hoping you guys can do, is kind of learn along with me here. If I can add anything, that's always a bonus. But thanks for just being a fan of history, and if you're watching this, I'm sure you are. Really appreciate that. It's really important, more important than you usually realize. All right, with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.